Alrighty, guys, what's going on? We're back here. We're back in our hometowns, back home from the trip, and we got episode 14, I think. 14 here. And we're gonna still unpack some lessons and stuff we learned from the conference, which if you guys didn't check out the last episode, Greg and I got to meet up in person in Austin, Texas at the Capitalism Conference. Maybe we could even like briefly unpack what that is, because maybe some people no idea what that was or why we were there. So maybe
Mhm.
we'll start from there, and then I've got a few cool uh, insights that I think will be helpful for anyone who's kind of in this space. So, Greg, why don't you just what was Capcom? What was the deal with that?
Yeah, so basically, Ben, you and I first met each other through it's basically like an online community and program for people building e-commerce brands. So that program is run through a company called Capitalism.com. We both know the founder of that company. I do some coaching inside their community. You've been featured as a case study multiple times with what you've got going on. So really, the conference is all about bringing together people in that world, and really the messaging is that nowadays in some circles, capitalism is kind of this bad word, kind of has like bad connotations. But really, the messaging behind the conference and the organization that puts it on is that when done right, like it's really a positive force for change in the world. Um, Anybody who's running a business, you're going to have a really hard time succeeding if you're not delivering something that people want, right? You have to be, your product has to be, your product or service has to be good enough that people will exchange their hard-earned money for what it is that you're offering. And really good businesses are ones where people come back again and again and choose to exchange their hard-earned money for your goods or services. So ultimately, like a successful business is one that is serving a whole bunch of people at scale, right? Ultimately, the consumer is deciding whether or not they're spending money on this or that. So, like businesses that grow really big are good at something in terms of delivering something that people want or need. And it's just like, how do we do that? Like, as business owners, how do we create products and services that serve people so that they want to pay us money for it again and again and again? So, they had some really cool keynotes in there. You and I mentioned a few in the last episode, some people who built some really cool and successful things. And the attendees are there just like trying to learn and network. And again, like this, it's a community of people who want to use a business to like affect some greater change in the world.
Mhm. Awesome. No, that's great. And this is solid because I'll shout out Ryan's book right now, which is a great place to start for anyone who maybe hasn't is not familiar with him. So Ryan's the founder of capitalism.com and he puts on the conference, but his book 12 months to 1 million, it's just a great place to jump in for anyone who's looking to start a brand or even is interested in a business and is like, well, what should I sell? Brand building, which is kind of what Greg just outlined, is I mean, that's the best way to do it, I think. Whatever you're selling, you're building some kind of a brand. But his book, 12 Months to 1 Million, which we'll link, is specifically about building a physical products brand, what that looks like. But it's also relevant because what I suggested to you we maybe chat about was the different levels of entrepreneur that were at this conference that we heard from, chatted with. Some of them were on stage. Some of them was just, in passing and people you're hearing about them just starting out, or they've just read the book and they have an idea for this product. So that's fitting because it's not the same, but in his book, he talks about maybe it's only three stages, but the grind, the growth, and the gold, kind of these stages of the grind is when you're starting from scratch. You've got an idea, you're getting excited, and what do you do? That's when you got to grind. You got to get the ball moving. The growth is when you kind of prove out a concept. You've launched your product and you're looking to grow it. Okay, you know, some people are liking it. You're building credibility. How do you grow that? And then, the gold is what you decide to do with that brand, which is potentially sell it, potentially exit, or maybe just optimize it for cash flow and continue to, have it as like a cash positive asset. So uh I think we could just maybe chat about those levels and also I know I had lots of conversations, you probably did too, about people who are like at these stages and what that kind of
Mhm.
looks like to move up through there. So
Yeah.
sound good?
Let's do it. Yeah. Why don't we start? Why don't you outline what you view as, well, you just mentioned grind growth gold is 3 levels. Is there a fourth, either like
Mm,
beyond that we
yeah.
can add to the mix?
Yeah, I'd say there is. And I'm going to put the fourth one as kind of probably like more than one business built and potentially sold. So maybe it's someone
Mhm.
who has built and sold, and now they're almost okay. It's not, a one-off thing. It's, oh, I'm playing this game of entrepreneurship. I'm investing in this, or I'm starting this other brand, or
Mhm.
I have a portfolio or a fund, something like that. I think that's kind of that next piece.
Nice. Okay. Yeah, yeah, I've got some ideas about that. We can definitely talk about that. Let's start at the beginning. So many people who were there are in an early stage, either they're pre-launch, pre-revenue. Um, I think most of the people there had at least an idea of what they were doing.
Mhm.
And then even beyond that, like that very first like sale made, right? Maybe you
Yep.
just launch, like you've made a couple of sales, some sort of validation, but then there's this stage where you're like, okay, now what? Like you've made some money, but how do you turn this into a business? Like how do you turn this into a machine where it starts to kind of function without your active daily input grinding for every single sale? So, um, and like 12 months ago, dude, like this was you at the last conference, like
Yeah.
strong idea. I remember you bringing me a prototype of your product and handing it off, and I'm like, yeah, man, this is cool. This could work. Go for it. And now you're coming back in a different situation. So I'm curious, um, what are kind of your takeaways from the people that you spoke to who are at that stage? And if you can reflect back kind of on your last 12 months journey, like being at
Mhm.
that stage 12 months ago and then being in a very different spot this time around.
Yeah. 100%. Love this. So I had a number of conversations where I found myself trying to like download some of my brain into someone else. So I'm like, I hope you can succeed faster. And I hope I can be articulate enough to give you something that will be helpful for you to accelerate your grind, your start, your 0 to 1, your 0 to the first 10K month. So yes, I had not launched at the last conference. I had prototypes. And I think it was at the conference that I went from below 100 Instagram followers to just over 100 Instagram followers because, I was showing people what I was doing and getting them to follow my Instagram. So had not taken a sale. Um, but what I was absorbing at that time was, uh, I was trying to pull those nuggets of what might be helpful for when I was launching, which ended up being, I think, about a month later. Um, and at the time, one thing I was really excited about was the co-CEO from Black Rifle Coffee, who was one of the keynote speakers, who uh, was one of the inspirations behind my brand. I've always loved their brand, and I wanted to hear what he had to say. And he had a great keynote. It was called Formula for Disruption, something like that. Uh, but he had this acronym, and it's funny. I went back into my notebook from last year, and I didn't finish writing down the acronym. So I'm like, I got to find this now. But the letters were TTEC or something like that. But the takeaways that I wrote down were a bigger growing market. Uh, what is the U? And I don't know them all, but it was like have an edge with your product, a growing market, um, emotional connection. It was a few of those kind of foundational pieces that I remember thinking, okay, that like he's kind of giving me because I liked what they did, but I was still trying to figure out how to do that. And I liked how he talked about, I think it was something like memorable product, or I'll have to actually pull up that acronym again. But why I bring that up is because having that edge or that aspect to your brand that can emotionally resonate with people is really important. And that was the number one thing I was trying to communicate to people who are starting was emotional connection with your target audience is everything. There can seem like so many different things to learn, but what can kind of get your ads working or get to people to even care is the fact that you can create a bit of an emotional connection, which can be different types of connection, but like amusement, interest, inspiration, relatability, something where uh, people will care what you're doing. Um, we've talked about maybe bad examples of this in the past, which is okay. I'm starting to sell kitchen products like wooden spoons and bowls, and that's nice, but nobody cares. So I was trying to encourage people early on to uh, lean into that emotional connection, which often is okay, what do you kind of feel strongly about? That's usually going to be part of how you create that message. And then find a channel, find a way to start communicating that emotion. Pick your TikTok, your Instagram, or whatever. And so that's very early stages. That's with trying to get ready for a launch or get your first 10, 25 sales. But that's kind of what I was trying to share was, really dig deep to try to think about how you can emotionally connect so people care about what you're doing.
Mhm. Awesome. I love that. As you were speaking, I pulled up my recording of Tom Davin's keynote, and I have the slide
Okay,
right
okay.
here. So, just for our listeners who are on the edge of their seats, Tom Davin's formula for disruption, the acronym is TUPTEC. So the first one is total addressable market. Like, what is the total market opportunity? Number two is there an underserved segment?
Mm.
Right. So for Black Rifle, they're hitting that segment of people who feel very disrespected by like big West Coast coffee companies that have a very different ethos.
Mhm.
Uh, the third one is product. So product, if we're selling a physical product, the product itself is important, has to be good. Number four is team, right? So like, what are the pieces that we can bring together? Number five is edge. And I don't know what the context is around that.
Yeah,
We'll have to,
that's one of the ones I latched onto where I think he unpacked
okay.
and kind of said, we've got this kind of attitude, this I think to me that goes along with the underserved market
Okay.
because it's who you're serving. And then the edge is, what is your edge? What is your sort
Yeah.
of
So
why
maybe another
different?
word for that would be the USP, the unique selling
Yep.
proposition. That might be okay, cool. And then the last one is channel, right? So for a lot of people, that's Amazon. For other people, it's TikTok Shop, and for some people, it's Facebook ads plus website, um, which is a whole interesting topic. Maybe we either hit that at the end or we hit that next week. But
Yep.
yeah, that's some interesting perspectives on that to share from the conference as well.
Yep.
Uh, cool. So yeah, I agree. Like it's so hard. Like because I do a lot of coaching and working with people in this industry, and so many. I mean, just because of bell curve, like a lot of the people that I interact with are at this early stage, and it's really challenging because um, there's kind of a steep learning curve, right? There's so much that you have to get at least kind of right to get that initial traction. And then it's really about focus and maintenance and optimization, which, which I think we'll talk about next. But um, yeah, it really is like if you can get that initial validation, like if you can get your first 1,000 or 10,000 in sales, um, like that is the beginning of the snowball. And I don't want to say it gets easier, but the the problems change. But at least you have some direction and focus after that point, right? After that initial phase where it's like, okay, this works. Do I add on the next thing or do I double down on this thing? But at the very beginning, it's like you don't know what you don't know. Tons of skill sets come into play, and it really is, I think, the most difficult part, like that very first stage. And so kudos to everybody who gets through that or at least attempts to, right? Even if you get through that and realize that maybe the thing that you picked isn't like, maybe you don't have a huge total addressable market, or maybe you don't legitimately have an edge, right? And so you have to kind of go back and maybe you recalculate something, you pick something else, you pivot either product or market. But that first step is always the hardest, but it's the most important one to take.
Mhm.
So these people who are at that stage, but still showing up at this conference, which, I mean, it's not a cheap ticket. I just have so much admiration and respect for the people who do that, because committing to an event like this, like making that kind of investment into your network, for many people, that is kind of the first step of the first steps that leads to something great, right?
Mhm.
So that's kind of my yeah, I spoke to a lot of people who are kind of in that stage, and it's like um I think in another episode we can break down like what are all the really important critical things that you have to get kind of right. We might have touched on this in the past, and just maybe outline that for people to give them the best chance of like um, if we're going to do like a checklist,
Yep.
what are the items and what do I need to do for each one to give you the chance to get that initial traction, and then have a way to be like, yes, this is the thing, or no, I got to pivot. Again, this is 80% of the work.
Yep.
This part, 80% of the work. And then after that, we get to stage two, right?
Yep.
So let's talk about stage two.
Awesome. Yeah. So I'd say stage two is basically, validation at some level. You've got some sales going on, and stage two is about what is the right way to add fuel to the fire to take you from, you know, maybe 1,000 a day to 3 or 4,000 a day, or even a few hundred a day. Consistent sales to a solid amount of consistent sales. Probably to hit that, the kind of the goal is to hit that 100K a month. That's $1 million business in a year. So stage two is interesting because, in some cases, people identify right fairly close to the start. They identify a channel that it's the same thing that almost takes them, from their first few to their first, few thousand, which might be if they start to figure out, say, organic as a way to get to get that first group of fans, those first few sales. In that case, it's like, we'll do more of that, like keep doing that, because if that's something you're figuring out, it doesn't make sense to go learn a paid channel right away, maybe if that is continuing to work. So it's weird because level two is that growth stage. It's like, okay, maybe you've made your first thousand, I'd say your first $1,000 to $10,000 in sales, and you're thinking, how do I grow this? And typically that'll be one channel, I think, that they should focus on, and kind of one method. So the channel uh, that might be PPC on Amazon might be the way that you can do that. That might make the most sense. Then we see kind of some of these hybrids where it's like, okay, you can do PPC on Amazon, but you know, just doing that is not as good as driving some organic traffic to Amazon as well. So I think stage two is really about identifying kind of a channel or a hybrid of channels that you can focus on to take yourself to that $1 million run rate.
Mhm.
So I wasn't sure what that was going to be. Going back to kind of my story early on, I thought my channel was actually, I joined a mastermind for podcast guesting, and I was going to pitch podcasts and try to sell uh, the hosts on the mission of my brand and kind of the case study of what I was trying to do. And hopefully they aligned with that. And then I would be able to, get in front of audiences that would want to be customers. It was cool. The guy who put it on, he had done this with an e-commerce brand successfully. So I thought, okay, I can replicate that. I was planning on doing that until I met someone at Capcom who suggested that I just test some Facebook ads at least. And because I was somewhat familiar with the platform from my drop shipping days, I thought this is a low risk, high reward, potentially high reward thing to try, which is another great way to think about these things. I'm saying focus on one channel, but if you can place bets on different channels in small ways to see what do I enjoy, what gets traction, what am I good at? Then lean into that. Like, you don't need to just pick and then be like, well, it's Google ads for me. It's like, well, it might not be. So play around a little bit. But for me, as soon as I established that Facebook could, okay, if this can take me from 3 sales a day to then 10 sales a day, then I was like, okay, well, can we get it to go from 10 to 20 sales a day? And so I just kept doing that. I kept focusing on that. And that was the vehicle that worked for me. At the conference, the people that I chatted to in this period, it's, this can be tough too. There was a guy on Amazon who had gotten through that early stage. He'd made his first, I think, 10K or plus in sales, but seems kind of stuck there because he was saying he was having some issues with Amazon reviews and he wasn't sure how to really ramp up his traffic there. So there's going to be challenges with whatever channel you pick, but it's kind of identifying that channel and hopefully getting some wins there and then doubling down.
For sure. Yeah. And I just want to reiterate, like, I personally do not know a single person who got to $1 million by doing Amazon plus Shopify plus Facebook ads plus Instagram plus TikTok plus podcast, right? It's usually like people might try a couple things at the beginning, but it's usually one single thing that will carry them from level one up to $1 million a year run rate. One thing. And it's interesting. I think we mentioned this in our live cast last time, but one of the things that was so striking from the keynote speakers at this conference, people who had broken $100 million in either sales or valuation, every single one of them spoke about how for them to scale, they had to decrease their product line. Some of these people talked about cutting 80% of their profitable SKUs so that they could focus on the 20% that were really working. And one guy in particular did this, and I think they were already at or close to a 9-figure run rate, right? $100 million, but they added $100 million in revenue in 1 year by cutting 80% of their catalog and focusing all of their capital and advertising behind the SKUs that were really, really able to be like market dominating. So yeah, when you're starting out, really that's kind of what you need to figure out is like, what is the one thing that has the potential to carry me from where I am now to $1 million? And instead of trying to do everything, decide what that one thing is going to be and go all in on that one thing.
Yep. Yeah, it was really cool to hear that because it's something that's applicable at the start, but it was really neat how that can consistently, that doubling down, that idea of doubling down, 80-20 kind of thing is what really moves things forward. So yeah, the second level is tricky in its own way. Sometimes it's just more of what works. Sometimes it's still a little bit of playing around because you're maybe switching from that organic grind hustle, like you said, one-on-one, getting a sale or getting a review to, okay, I can't just do this. We need a vehicle that can take us there. So it's playing around and figuring out what that is.
Yeah.
But if you find something that's starting to work, do more of it. And people can sometimes get stuck there for a few years. I talked to a guy who as well, was one of the brands that Ryan's actually invested in, who was kind of stuck for a little bit around, I'm not sure specifically, 30 to 50K a month, maybe, not bad, but for the margins they had, they really needed to grow. And so it was just recently that with some TikToks getting traffic to their Amazon, that they were really able to crack that 100K per month. And then I got excited when I heard that, and I kind of said, so yeah, now you're going to like stack on like more creators and stuff, right? And he was like, yeah, I mean, that's the plan. And I was like, I hope so. It's like double down on that for sure.
Absolutely. So, another conversation I want to throw out there. When you have something that's working, you want to focus on it, but you want to still have enough vision, like higher level vision that you can do some of this optimization at this stage, right? Not get distracted with other things, but it's like when something's working, just ask yourself, like, what am I missing here? How could I make it work better? So I did speak to someone, you probably know her as well, but she's been building a brand for a couple of years, and she's stacking. I mean, she's got some traction and success. Like November last Q4, her best month ever. She told me she broke 30K on Amazon. And what I realized is that this is selling a product that averages about $10 per sale, and it's a consumable. And I said, have you thought about just doing bigger bundles, right? Allow people to buy a 3-pack and a 5-pack instead of just the 1-pack, because it's this pretty much the same amount of effort. Like, is it the to make a bunch of $30 sales is about the same amount of advertising effort as to make a bunch of $10 sales, right? It's still in the impulse buy range, going from 10 to 30 for just more of the same product, like conversion rate roughly the same. And I said, if you had been focusing on pushing a 3-pack bundle all through November, you would have crossed 100K with the same amount of effort, pretty much the same amount of ad spend. And they were like, oh, right? This is a product that I guarantee will do just fine with a 3-pack bundle. They could legitimately quit offering the singles, and I think they'd still be fine. Like they'd be doing consistent like 60K a month with changing nothing else. So this is what I mean. Like, take a look at what you're doing and just kind of ask yourself, could I be doing this better? And some of the questions to ask is, how do I get more customers? Right. So the other guy that you mentioned found a new traffic channel that was pretty easy to plug into. They're getting a ton of new qualified traffic, and that has caused their boost. But you can also ask, how can I get more per sale? Right. So maybe we do bundles. And then the third question is, how do I get people to come back and buy, like make a repeat? How do I increase the customer lifetime value? So that would be like launching new products or getting more repeat purchases. So the first two things that are honestly like not that hard to solve. We can test some different traffic without getting distracted by it. We can try raising our prices. We can try creating bundles. Why not? Like that is not like that's worth testing to optimize, and it's
that's
different.
not losing focus on the growth.
Exactly.
That's helping to make the most of the growth.
100%. All right.
No.
Should we talk about stage 3?
Yeah. Yeah. So stage 3, I would say there was a panel, for instance, of brands who I think maybe the lowest one was 5 or 6 or maybe 8 million is what in sales over the past few years. So decent sized brands, they've for the most part established their channels. They've got those products that are working, and they're focusing on, crossing 10 million or maybe 20 million. So they're in that real range of, okay, this is a legit brand. This is working. At that point, it's, probably more products. It's probably more advertising budget, things like that. But yeah, I kind of see it as, approaching 8 figures or an exit, a few $1 million exit. And I would say like, that's where I'm looking. I'm looking towards, so I'm not there. But that's what I'm looking at. And that's what's interesting me right now. And I just said to my brother, like yesterday, who's been taking over some of the operations of my business, is I'm getting humbled because it's a different skill set. And I've heard Ryan say this. I've heard different people say this. It's a different skill set to get from 0 to a million, then 8 million, or then 1 to 10 million. And you're like, yeah, whatever. And then I've really had that experience of, okay, you can hustle on your phone and on your laptop, and it's hard work, but you can hustle yourself to $1 million, from your bedroom or whatever, or your basement. But as you start to get beyond that, yeah, there's team, going back to that acronym, team becomes important. Systems, operations, forecasting. There's like a new skill set. So I guess I see this third level as people who have, weren't just sort of a flash in a pan. We got to 1 million and then it kind of died off, and that can happen like pretty easily. There were some brands that were at the conference last year that only one specifically I'm thinking of that, they had this promise. They looked like they were, good. And then, you know, they couldn't get the systems figured out. So the margins weren't there and they couldn't cross that. So it's that new skill set. It's the ability to have a team, the ability to hire the right people. That becomes very important. And I see this level 3 as the people who have made it through that sort of trial and
Mhm.
are then once again on the growth.
Absolutely. Yeah, you're right. It's a different skill set. And, I've worked with a couple people who have been kind of in that zone, doing that crossover. And one of the questions, you heard me ask you this question not too long ago, but the question is, okay, you're right here. You're honestly kind of scrambling to keep up. But the next question that you need to ask is, okay, if tomorrow all of my orders 10x'd, what would break? And usually the answer is a lot of things, right? Inventory, fulfillment, just a lot of things break, but those are like, now you know what all your constraints are to growth, right? Or if you're doing a lot of stuff yourself and 10 times of the volume comes in, maybe you break, right? And so just asking that question and just kind of knowing what would no longer function at that scale tells you exactly what you need to focus on to get to that scale, right? Because if we keep growing, then it's inevitable that we hit that, right? So we can kind of start like identifying and solving for those bottlenecks up front. Sometimes it's people, sometimes it's systems, sometimes it's pivots in manufacturing and fulfillment. But like you said, it's a different skill set. It's a different set of problems to solve. But then they're all solvable. Like people have gotten through this, people have done it. And so you as the business owner kind of have to pivot from what got you there to what is going to get you to the next level. And it's humbling because it's
Yep.
kind of like, it's scary, man, because it's like you're starting from scratch again, because there's this whole new skill set and stuff you need to learn. But it's not like you have nothing to lose now, right? You have all this revenue that's coming in, and it's like you've got to maintain that while still, juggling, learning, and implementing this new skill set. You might have people on payroll, right? So you've got customers counting on you for fulfillment and all this stuff. So it's like the stakes raise.
Mhm.
So it is a really critical pivot point. I spoke to somebody at the conference who by themselves has gotten up to like just shy of 2 million a year. And this person is an incredible entrepreneur, but they have hit the ceiling because there's no more of them to go around. And so now the pivot that they're working on is, okay, what do I need to hand off? What can I hand off? Like, what is the next step to scale beyond that? Because their brand has plenty of run room to go higher than they are, and this person is the constraint. And when you've done everything yourself up to that point, like it's an awesome achievement, but it's challenging because you you don't like handing all that off to free up your plate again is risky, terrifying, right? But that's kind of, again, like that's the challenge at
Yeah.
that stage, at stage
It
three.
very quickly, you get your medal, but it very quickly becomes not a badge of honor if you can't get out of that.
Yeah,
It
yeah,
becomes obvious that you are the problem with your business,
right,
which is kind of
right.
funny, right? Because yeah, there's a lot of these qualities that will get you there that are commendable and impressive. And then, you know, if you're kind of stuck in this place for a few months or hopefully not a few years,
Yeah,
any experienced, veteran entrepreneur will look at you and say, well, you're the problem here.
yeah,
And so yeah, that's humbling. So identifying that, I guess, as soon as possible, and then making those changes that you need to make, which, yeah, some of these people from that panel said in some cases that's going to be, don't be afraid to hire the right person, or ask yourself, am I the person slowing this down? Why is that?
mhm,
So some humility and some honesty there, and then some good counsel can get you through there. So
absolutely.
yeah, that's I'd say that's level 3. And then that leads us to level 4, which I can only kind of, I mean, it's interesting because I shouldn't speak for you. I can only kind of like point and look at this level and kind of be inspired by people who seem to have kind of made it through or have who have repeated this process.
Mhm.
But I don't know, I'll let you jump in and kick this off.
Yeah, level 4 is very interesting because I think it's people. There's like different versions of level 4.
Yeah.
It's the people who have successfully built teams and systems, and now they're just kind of they might be guiding or directing, but they're not doing all of the doing. And then, I mean, the business truly grows beyond them, right? The business becomes a thing in and of itself that doesn't necessarily need that founder, right? And so uh, I'd say pretty much anybody who hit 9 figures, like this is the stage they're at. They have a legitimate business that, like, yes, they're influencing it. Yes, they're the founder, but they're not necessarily in there like doing the doing every single day. They figure out how to get out of that. The other type of level 4 person is like they get to a point, they sell it, and maybe they're doing the serial entrepreneur thing. They're starting up a new thing, but kind of like older, wiser. And it's fascinating, but I've seen a lot of situations where the second time or third time founder, um, it doesn't go as quickly. It's not as easy that second or third time around. And I have some theories about why that is, but I've never, like, it's very rare from where I'm sitting to see somebody come in and have an easier time the second time around, right? Which you think, wait, they have all this experience, all this knowledge. The second time should be easier, but that's usually not what I see. It's harder. It's kind of like how many movies pull off a really good sequel? Like usually that number two, yeah, I mean, there's some exceptions, right? We've got the original Star Wars trilogy, maybe The Godfather, but by and large, by and large, the sequel is rarely as good as the original. Um, and I think that's a really interesting observation, right? So, does that mean that there's some luck and magic involved in that first time around? Perhaps. I also personally think that sometimes people doing the second go around, they already know what the end process looks like, and they're maybe trying to skip to it too quickly. Like they end up in like inadvertently skipping steps, trying to make things go faster. Like they're trying to skip that stage 1 and 2, like the really kind of hard, miserable part, and you can't skip it. So that's kind of my observation on that version of level 4. Some people pull it off. Other people get really, really stuck on the second or third thing, and it just never gets to the level that the first one did. It's like
That's
there's a
really
thing,
interesting.
this thing that needs, like, there's some lesson that got missed. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's very interesting though.
Well, what is neat there is like not that it was all luck, but there could have been a couple factors that was not necessarily their playbook that brought about that result. And so they might think that it was, oh, I just know what to execute on. And then, those pieces may not line up the same way the second time round. And then when you combine that with a bit of like potentially some ego, yeah, I think I didn't expect you to say that, but as you say that, I'm thinking about that, and that's really interesting because I'm already asking myself the question, can I do this again? And what excites me is like 0 to 1 million. And I hope I get the chance to do that again.
Mhm.
Um, Got to focus for now. But that's really interesting. One more point to add to that, which might be helpful is, you know, okay, there's something to be said for having this track record of, okay, I've built this or I've done this or I've sold this. And so, you might be some form of this quotes like level 4 entrepreneur. But I think a pitfall can sometimes be people think they're a higher level they are, even if they're at the start. And so they're also trying to skip the steps. They're like, well, I bought Facebook ads. I'm a media buyer, so we can just jump into like, and it's like, well, you might be really good at that, but don't assume that you're a level 4 across all the other,
Mhm.
categories, you still need to know your customer. You still need to go grind through that stuff.
Yeah,
And so I think that's a helpful exercise too, is like sometimes just ask yourself that, am I, assuming, I forget who tweeted it or said it, but just something to the extent of if you're not getting the results you want, like you probably aren't as good at a thing as you think you are. And so
yeah,
that's maybe a helpful thing to just stay humble and have that white belt mentality of, okay, what do I need to learn here? Why is this not working? And go through those
for
steps.
sure. Yeah, and just another perspective here. Oftentimes, when we are at like stage 1 or 2, we're looking to people that are at stage 2 or 3 ahead of us for some guidance, right? We look to mentors and guides in what we're doing. If you get to the point where you've like built and sold and you want to rebuild, I think what most people do is they look to themselves as the guide. They're like, oh, well, I'm going to just like this worked and I'm going to try to repeat the thing that worked, which on its surface makes sense. However, wouldn't it make more sense to look to other stage 4 entrepreneurs who have successfully done the thing over and over and over? So I'm thinking, I don't know if you know Jeff Hoffman. He did like Priceline.com. Like he built some massive brands repeatedly, like very good serial entrepreneur. AJ Patel, right? 3 9-figure brands under his belt. Let's maybe take a look at how AJ does that. By the way, AJ was at the conference. I don't know if you saw him.
Yeah.
He was hanging out in the back. uh, so if you get to level 3 and you sell and you want to start a new thing and like be the serial entrepreneur guy, maybe look to the people that have done that successfully for guidance and mentorship, right? Because like I said, there often seems to be a missing piece in people trying to repeat their one and only one hit wonder, right? And yeah, you've learned, you've grown, like you're more powerful than you were at the beginning, but there's probably, like you said, you might think you're better than you are, and there might be like another batch of skills that you need to put in place for the second thing, right? Different market, different customer, different sales channel, whatever. Again, I've just seen this happen over and over and over. And just hats off to the people who figure this out and are able to just like come in and just turn things to gold, whatever they touch. It's a remarkable skill. And I'm in awe of it because like I don't have that yet. Right. But those are the people I look to learn how that works.
Yeah. That's solid. Stay humble, folks. I think that's a wrap. We'll get into that other stuff next week, but yeah, that's all for now. I'll link up the book. And yeah, drop a comment of what level you're in or what you're trying to do, and we'll go from there.